They said it was impossible. They told you the odds were stacked too high, the barriers too strong, the enemy too powerful. And yet, here you stand, unshaken, unbreakable. Because this was always yours to claim, not by luck, not by chance, but because you were built for it. The world doesn't get to decide your limits. They don't get to write your ending. You are not just another name in the crowd. You are the outlier, the anomaly, the force they never saw coming. You walk into the fire, not because you have to, but because you refuse to let it define you. So let them underestimate you. Let them think they've got you cornered. They have no idea what's about to happen next. The stage is set. The spotlight is yours. Now show them why they were never meant to win. They think they've got you figured out, but you're already steps ahead, playing a game they don't even understand. Just when they believe they've closed in, reality shifts. What was certain dissolves into chaos. They reach for you, but grasp at nothing. You don't just evade, you redefine the battlefield itself. One moment, you're right there. Their target, their prey. The next, you're rewriting the script, making their strategy look outdated, their plans irrelevant. Their assumptions crumble as they watch you move, fluid, untraceable, untouchable. The realization dawns slowly, first as confusion, then as disbelief. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a fluke. You exist outside their expectations, and now they're struggling to accept it. The certainty in their eyes fades, overtaken by the creeping awareness that they were wrong, badly. Their confidence was a carefully constructed illusion, and you just shattered it. The shift is subtle at first, the pause in their stance, the flicker of doubt in their expressions. But it grows, festering into hesitation, into fear. Their arrogance was built on the belief that they controlled the outcome, that victory was inevitable. Now the cracks in that belief are spreading, unstoppable. A quiet murmur escapes one of them, barely a whisper, but enough to confirm the truth. That shouldn't be possible. The silence that follows is louder than any battle cry. There's nothing left to explain. Words would be wasted on those who thought they had you measured. Let them scramble for an explanation. Let them search for patterns where there are none. You don't follow their rules. You don't fit within their logic. Every step you take, every move you make, is a lesson they weren't prepared to learn. They came expecting a fight they could predict. Instead, they found something beyond their comprehension. The game they thought they were playing, it was over before it began. Drop a comment. I rewrite the rules if you refuse to submit to the limits they impose. If every attempt to confine you only fuels your ascent, if the walls they build become the very steps you climb. They called your first breakthrough luck, your second coincidence, your third an anomaly. But now, the weight of evidence is undeniable. The numbers betray them, their calculations collapse, and their once steady voices falter. You've seen them dismiss impossibilities before, yet here they are, confronted with one they can't ignore. It shakes them, it terrifies them, because despite their expertise, their analysis, their certainty, you were never supposed to win. Their need for control mutates into desperation, into frenzied theories and false conclusions. They search for loopholes in reality, trying to justify why they're losing a battle they were certain they'd won. They grasp at explanations, unwilling to accept the obvious. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't chance. It was inevitability, written in every challenge you overcame, every barrier you turned into momentum. They placed you within their boundaries, convinced you would break against them. Instead, you shattered them entirely. If God be for us, Who can be against us? Romans 8:31. They thought they had it all figured out, thought they had built a world where everything moved according to their rules, where power belonged only to those who played the game by their design. They told themselves that strength was predictable, outcomes were controlled, and limits were absolute. They built systems to ensure no one could rise above them, no one could move outside the framework they had set in place. But then you showed up, and everything changed, because you don't fit inside their boxes, you don't play by their rules. You were never meant to wait your turn, to seek permission, to move according to their timeline. And now, they see it. They see that every setback meant to break you only strengthened your resolve. Every obstacle thrown in your path became another step forward. They wanted to define you by your failures, but you never stayed down long enough for them to write the ending. And that terrifies them, because they can't explain it, they can't control it, they can't stop it. Drop a comment. I am the shift. If every barrier meant to stop you became the foundation for your rise, if every attempt to hold you back only accelerated your momentum, if every system designed to contain you has been forced to adjust to your existence, they're scrambling now, trying to figure out how they lost control, trying to understand how someone like you could keep rising, moving, dominating, without their approval. They escalate, thinking that if they just apply more pressure, if they just tighten their grip, they'll finally stop you. But all they're doing is accelerating their own downfall. Because you don't break under pressure, you don't move backwards, you don't crumble when they expect you to. And that realization shakes them to their core. Because the truth is, they were never as powerful as they thought. Their strength was built on illusion, on systems that only worked when everyone played along. But you were never part of their equation. Silence spreads like a slow poison as realization sets in. The tension thickens. The air itself seems heavier. Their steps are less certain. Their coordination dissolving. This isn't just a battle anymore. It's something deeper, something primal. The fear isn't just in their faces. It's in their hesitation, in the way they grip their weapons too tightly, in the glances they exchange, searching for reassurance they no longer have. One stammers something barely coherent, voice laced with disbelief. Another takes an involuntary step back, the first crack in a breaking foundation. Someone else, hands shaking, chooses surrender before the fight is even over. It's not just fear, it's recognition. They aren't just losing, they've already lost. No words are needed. You could explain, but why bother? Their failure isn't in their lack of skill. It's in their refusal to accept that this was never their battle to win. You don't fight by their rules. You don't play their game. They expected resistance. Instead, they met inevitability. This is not a contest. It's a demonstration. And they are the audience to their own defeat. Drop a comment. I rewrite fate if you refuse to be boxed into their limits. If every attempt to suppress you only strengthens your rise. If their structure collapses the moment you step outside of it. They clung to the illusion that this was chance, that you were an anomaly, an exception, rather than the rule. But reality doesn't bend for them. It bends around you. The statistics betray them. Their own calculations turn against them, and the weight of undeniable proof becomes suffocating. They thought they could predict every outcome, and yet, here you stand. Desperation turns to denial. They reach for explanations, any justification to make this fit within the world they understand. They claim it's unfair, unnatural. They theorize, they rationalize, they attempt to reframe what they cannot control. Because the truth is far more terrifying than defeat. It's irrelevance. Their rules were never laws. Their control was never absolute. You are proof that boundaries are imaginary, that the impossible is nothing more than a concept waiting to be discarded. They once believed they shaped the world. Now they realize it was never theirs to shape in the first place. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. Isaiah 54:17. They built walls around you, thinking they could contain what was never meant to be contained. They sketched out blueprints, ran their numbers, wrote their rules, all in an attempt to hold back something they were never meant to control. But they didn't realize that the moment you walked in, their foundation had already begun to crack. You are not just another piece of their puzzle. You are not a cog in their machine. You are the disruptor, the shift in the tide, the one force they could never prepare for. And that's why they fear you. Because their system was built on predictability, on calculations that assume everyone plays by the same rules. But you were never bound by their equations. They had a script, a strategy, a predetermined outcome, and you tore it apart just by existing. They labeled you impossible because they couldn't quantify you. They called you an anomaly because they couldn't control you. But what they refused to admit is that you were never theirs to define. Drop a comment. I am the exception. If their carefully crafted plans crumble when you step in, if their expectations collapse under the weight of your presence, if their blueprints mean nothing the moment you arrive, because they built a world that depended on your absence. Now they're forced to reckon with your presence. They operate in whispers, in closed-door meetings, in strategy sessions where they speak in hushed tones, convinced they can pull the strings from the shadows. They thought secrecy would give them power. But here's what they never understood. What's meant to rise will rise, and what's meant to stand will not be moved. They launched their attacks, believing precision would make the difference, believing they could outmaneuver what was never in their control to begin with. But every move they make turns against them. Every strike they send rebounds in a way they never expected. Their weapons, their tactics, their certainty, it all collapses before it even reaches you. They have watched too many of their own fall, not by your hands, but by the sheer weight of their own miscalculations. They tried to cut you down, only to sever their own foundation. They tried to shut you out, only to find themselves trapped in the very cage they built for you. Because what they didn't understand is this: something greater moves with you, something they cannot name, something they cannot fight. It is the force that turns opposition into momentum, that shifts every attack into your acceleration. They cannot label it, they cannot touch it, but they feel it. And that terrifies them, because you were never meant to bow, you were never meant to fold. And now, all they can do is watch as you rise, untouchable, unstoppable, undeniable. They dismiss it at first, calling it luck, coincidence. But those who have seen enough know better. Hesitation spreads like a sickness among them. They've watched too many gamble against you and lose everything. Their voices lower when they speak of you, as if naming you too loudly might invoke consequences. This isn't strategy alone. It isn't just resilience. There is something in your existence that unravels destruction before it touches you. They lay obstacles in your path, only to trip over them themselves. They plot against you, only to become entangled in their own schemes. The ones who were certain before now tread carefully, unwilling to challenge what they do not understand. There is no formula to define your momentum, no science that explains why chaos bends around you but never consumes you. They search for meaning, but you were never meant to be dissected or explained. You were meant to keep moving. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. They have turned you into an unsolved problem, an enigma they cannot let go of. Every movement you make is recorded, analyzed, broken down in desperate attempts to find the flaw in your pattern. They have shattered countless others by predicting their behaviors, reducing people to data points, manipulating outcomes before they occur. But you refuse to conform. You do not fit within their charts. Do not follow the trajectory they expect. They map your history, but it refuses to dictate your future. You are the contradiction they cannot eliminate. Their research should have made you predictable, yet every hypothesis they create falls apart the moment you act. Equations break in your wake. Probabilities become meaningless. They are not failing to understand you. They are failing to grasp that their system was never built to contain something like you in the first place. The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118, verse 22. They thought they had it all figured out, thought they had the blueprint, the strategy, the power to dictate the course of everything. They measured, they calculated, they structured their world in a way that made sense to them. But what they never accounted for was you, because you don't fit their mold, and you were never supposed to. They put their faith in systems, in knowledge, in strategies they swore were infallible. They studied the patterns, analyzed the past, built formulas they believed would keep them on top. But the moment you entered, everything shifted. Because you are not the variable they can control, you are the force that rewrites the equation, and that unsettles them. Because you don't play by their rules, you don't conform to their expectations. They try to predict your movements, thinking if they can understand you, they can contain you. But the closer they look, the less they understand. The harder they try, the more their own logic betrays them. Drop a comment. I am the outlier if their expectations shatter when you show up, if their carefully drawn plans become meaningless in your presence, if their calculations crumble because they never accounted for someone like you. They tell themselves that knowledge is power. That control is in the hands of those who can define everything around them. And maybe that was true until now, because you weren't meant to be studied, dissected, or predicted. You were meant to rise beyond their comprehension. They tighten their grip, thinking that if they just analyze you more, if they just break you down into something explainable, they'll find a way to stop you. But they're looking in the wrong place, because what fuels you doesn't exist within their realm of understanding. Their theories, their logic, their neatly packaged conclusions, all of it unravels the moment you step in. And now, they're the ones scrambling for answers, because what was once their foundation is now shaking. Their order is crumbling. The rules they created, the principles they swore by, the systems they trusted, none of it is holding up anymore. They thought they could contain you with knowledge, but all they did was expose how limited their understanding truly is. And that's why they fear you. Because you are not confined by their logic, not bound by their conclusions, not shaped by their assumptions. You exist outside of their reach, outside of their predictions. They built their world believing they had accounted for everything, but they never accounted for you. And now, all they can do is watch as their framework collapses, while you continue to rise. They see dominance as a matter of restriction, as if cutting pathways would ensure your absence. They sever access points, reinforce barriers, tighten their grasp. Yet somehow, you always emerge where they least anticipate. You are a current slipping through the cracks, a force moving beyond their reach. The connections they attempt to sever reform in new ways, stronger and beyond their control. They operate within rigid structures, mistaking walls for absolutes, but you navigate through dimensions they don't even perceive. Every effort to erase you is wasted. They strike your name from records, attempt to erase proof of your existence, yet you remain, your presence undeniable, not through force, but through inevitability. They watch with growing unease as opportunities manifest in ways they never predicted. The spaces they lock down only become new points of expansion. The resources they withhold simply redirect themselves to your advantage. They measure power in tangible ways, mistaking visibility for influence, unaware that your reach extends through unseen corridors. They attempt to forecast your movements, but every projection fails. By the time they react, you are already past them. They assumed you played by the same rules, but you do not follow paths, you create them. They are still trying to chart the terrain, unaware that the landscape itself is shifting beneath their feet. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him. 1 Corinthians 2:9. They sit back and watch, convinced that if they study you long enough, they'll find the key, some hidden weakness, some flaw in your foundation. They believe that if they analyze your steps, track your movements, they can predict the moment you finally break. They think it's only a matter of time, but time is not on their side. Because every time they count you out, you rise. Every time they expect you to fall, you climb higher. They are grasping for answers, searching for patterns that do not exist, trying to impose logic on something that was never meant to be understood, only witnessed. See, they call it luck, because that's the only way they can justify it. Because to admit the truth would mean admitting there is something at work beyond their comprehension. They whisper behind closed doors, telling themselves that no one can defy the odds forever. But the problem isn't the odds. The problem is they never understood the game to begin with. Drop a comment. I am the exception if every trap they set turns into another stepping stone. If every plan to keep you down only lifts you higher. If every roadblock they place before you somehow clears itself at the exact right moment. They see the impossible bending around you. They see you walking through storms without getting swept away, stepping into chaos and coming out untouched. It shakes them to their core because they were taught that power is earned through strategy, that success is measured by effort alone. But you are not playing their game. You don't move by their metrics. You don't succeed by their standards. They told themselves they could track your rise, map out the moment you would finally stumble. But instead, every time they look for signs of weakness, all they find is proof that you were never meant to fall. And now, they are running out of explanations. They don't know how to define you because you don't fit into their categories. You don't follow their equations, don't operate by their logic. They tried to write you off, but the story kept going. They tried to close the door, but another one opened. They tried to measure your limits, but you moved beyond their reach before they even realized what was happening. And that's why they fear you. Because you don't just defy expectations, you erase them. You were never meant to fit inside their systems, never meant to be controlled by their predictions. They believed in their plans more than they believed in your resilience. And that was their first mistake. Because what they failed to realize is that failure was never part of your design. They cannot grasp that you exist beyond their predictions, beyond the margins of probability. They escalate their efforts, pushing harder, striking with more precision, convinced that greater force will finally unseat you. But no equation they rely on, no strategy they execute, accounts for the fact that every attack, every restriction, every attempt to suppress you only fuels your rise. They push, expecting resistance to weaken you, but all they succeed in doing is refining you. Their best calculations collapse under the weight of your persistence. The very foundation of their approach crumbles as they realize your momentum does not come from strategy alone. They thought power belonged to those who seized it. That control was the key to dominance. But they never understood that true strength is untouchable, immune to interference, unshaken by pressure. They mistake stillness for hesitation, unaware that it is the silence before the shift, the quiet moment before the inevitable turn. They expected struggle, but instead they find themselves unraveling under the weight of their own intentions. Their downfall does not come from direct confrontation, but from the very moves they thought would secure their victory. They seek signs of weakness, but all they see is their own decline, unfolding in real time. The positions they held, the influence they relied upon, it all slips from their grasp as the structure they built proves unable to contain what was never theirs to control. They are not losing because of what you have done. They are losing because they failed to realize that you were never within their reach to begin with. Every attempt to stop you has only ensured that they become the architects of their own irrelevance. The victory they once believed was theirs, it never was. They tried to drag the past forward, believing old wounds could still bind you, but those chains have long since shattered. Their efforts to contain you collapse under their own weight, their accusations slipping through fingers that no longer hold any claim over your name. They whisper it in the dark, hoping the echoes will reach you, hoping to tether you to the world they once controlled. But your name no longer belongs to them. It resonates in spaces beyond their reach, infused with something unbreakable. They are unsettled, not by what you have done, but by what you represent. Something they cannot influence, something they can no longer hold in place. Their greatest miscalculation was assuming you would remain within the boundaries they created. But with every move forward, their relevance fades, their hold weakens. Their resentment is nothing but a weight they must carry alone, growing heavier with each triumph they swore would never come. But their disbelief has no power here. Your ascent was never meant to make sense to those who were never destined to rise. They misunderstood the nature of your existence. You do not move within the same gravitational pull that keeps them tethered to a crumbling reality. They built their world around control, mistaking confinement for power. But you slipped through the gaps, reshaping the very ground they once claimed as unshakable. They expected you to fracture under pressure, to yield under force. But every attempt to break you only reforged you into something they could no longer comprehend. They used silence as a weapon, hoping absence would erase you, but instead it solidified your presence. Their resistance became your momentum, their opposition the fire that sharpened your edge. And now all they can do is watch. The ones who once dictated the pace now scramble to catch up, their certainty eroding with each step you take beyond their reach. They believed time was on their side, time to plan, time to suppress, time to decide your fate. but time has never been theirs to command. It bends to your will, shifting in ways they never anticipated. And now they are left as spectators, watching their own irrelevance settle in like a storm they cannot escape. Hold steady. Move with intention. Let their doubt fade into insignificance. And when the moment comes, speak. Not for those who sought to bury you, but for those still waiting to break free. Those standing on the edge, ready to step into the fire and claim what was always meant to be theirs.